Your top performers are closing off 30% of their opportunities is lost at that discovery stage. So don't beat them up about it. The conversion rates, the level of coverage your top performers need to hit quota is much, much lower than the level of coverage your B and C players need to hit quota.
Welcome to Revenue Insights. We're joined by revenue leaders from some of the highest growth companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys they've been on, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by Ebsta. We're an AI-first revenue intelligence platform designed to help you close more deals, retain more customers, and forecast better. Enjoy the podcast.
Right, I think that's plenty of time. Lovely to see you all here on this third of our series of webinars. This one's all about how our top sellers are outperforming their peers. My name's Adam Roberts. I lead the commercial charge here at Ebsta. I work alongside our CEO and Guy Rubin, who's going to take us through the following presentation. Guy, I'll hand it over to you, and I'll be bobbing in from time to time over the course of the next 30 minutes or so.
Very good. Adam, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. We decided to focus our energies on looking at what the top performers are doing differently to everybody else. And so before we jump into the content, I want to remind everybody where the content's come from. Last year, we analyzed 4.7 million opportunities that represented over $57 billion worth of pipeline. And for the very first time, we also analyzed 1.2 billion hours of sales calls, trying to understand really what our sellers are doing during the entire customer journey. So that's where the data came from. To kind of set the scene, as a quick reminder, we've got some numbers here that remind us where we were in 2023, and then the updates that came in 2024. So in last year, we saw win rates were increasing, deal values were going up, and sales cycles were reducing. So that's a good thing, right? We entered 2024 with some positive momentum. Unfortunately, this year has not been quite as exciting. We saw win rates drop quite dramatically, deal values have come down, and sales cycles have got longer. So we're all dealing with a lot of headwinds in most markets, from what we can see. So those are the challenges that we're all facing. So the key, and which kind of brings this topic really to the front of our minds, because in a lot of organizations we go into, we can see that there's a growing delta between our top performing sellers and the rest of our sales team. And so what we thought would be helpful for everybody is to talk a little bit about what those top performers are doing at each stage of that sales cycle, and try and talk you through how you can bring the B and C players along with you. So let's jump straight in. We've tried to break this down into a traditional sales process. So we've broken it into 5 stages. Now, your sales process might be longer or shorter. You might have slightly different names for your sales cycle, but the principles behind it still remain the same. We start at the top of the funnel with the prospecting process, and we're looking at how pipeline is being generated and which personas we're engaging with. We then going to be talking a little bit about the qualification process, whether it's MEDDIC or SPICed or BANT or any of the other methodologies you're using. What are the top performers doing differently with then qualification to the rest of your sales team? Then we're going to talk a bit more about the solution presented stage. So how you deal with those objections that come up and how well the top performers are dealing with them versus everybody else. Then we're going to talk about the negotiation process and what relationships you need to be managing during that cycle. And then we're going to jump into the closing process, the kind of deal management piece of the puzzle. Let's dive in and see what we come up with. So the source of the majority of the pipeline that we're working on. And what's really interesting here is that just 10% of opportunities are coming from partner referrals. In fact, less than 20% of businesses actually have a partner channel. The numbers increased quite a lot this year, but it's still very, very low. The other sources of organic inbound traffic and outbound activity going on with our traditional SDR teams. We can see that the referrals are a phenomenal source of leads. And not only do they get an outsized percentage of our revenue, but the velocity in which we are able to get those deals closed is much higher or much greater when the deals are coming through a warm source. So looking for opportunities that are coming through high intent, the top performers are able to sniff out the right opportunities to work on rather than just working on any lead that comes through the door. And we talked in our last presentation about how there has been a massive push in the marketing spend across most organizations. And the problem there is it's generating even more leads for us to work on. But unfortunately, the number of leads that match ICP hasn't really changed. So the top performers are much better at going through those leads and making sure that they're really investing the time in just the deals that match their ICP criteria. One of the other data points I really kind of lean into is this idea that that getting the VP of Finance involved in that sales cycle, we see as one of the highest performing personas, and has one of the highest positive influences on the velocity of a sale. And the challenge is working out when to get that finance persona involved in the sales process. So moving on to qualification, the difference between how well the top performers are using a qualification methodology versus the mid and lower performers. There's a direct correlation between how well we qualify our opportunities in the early stage of the sales cycle and the likelihood of the deals closing in the later stages. The problem we have as sales leaders is that we might still see deals closing off as lost at stage 4 or 5 in our sales process. But actually, if we dig into the data, we might find out that actually the deal was never qualified correctly in the first place. So getting our qualification methodology right and making it easy for the team to follow a methodology, for example, taking away that burden of doing the manual admin afterwards, can really help.
If I can come in there, Guy.
Yeah.
I think one of the startling things, even you being C players, that they know how to understand the situation. They're asking the right questions to understand what's the lay of the land in that particular organization. They're still very good at, uncovering pain. But the key differentiator where the top performers are outperforming the lower performers is really understanding, well, what's the critical event that's going to make these guys make a decision and move forward? Is it what's driving the priority here? And also then helping them make a decision, helping them go through that, guiding them through the buying process as to, who needs to be involved and knowing who needs to be involved. Those are the two key things that stand out here in the top performers versus everybody else.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the data tells us that the top performers are nearly 6 times more likely to follow a methodology effectively. And so this is one of the simplest things you can do to make sure that to bring the B and C players up is really help them with that training, in particular, as you say, around things like understanding critical events and decision-making criteria and process. How do we see people bridging that gap? Well, using automation and AI to extract things like how well the customer's been qualified should be a no-brainer. This is now almost table stakes for most organizations. So if you're not using AI to analyze the call recordings of your discovery calls, you should be. And what that does is it allows you to focus your energies on training the sales team on how to do the work, not how to do the admin. Because guess what? The AI is really, really good at the admin and consistently filling that information out and scoring how well you've qualified. The AI is really, really bad at building relationships with your buyers. And that's really where your sales team come in. So teaching them and training them on how to deal with those objections or how to go through that qualification process is absolutely key. But let's take away the admin burden. Let's make it easy for them to win by giving them a consistent approach that AI can take over and auto capture that information and score it in your system of record, whether that's HubSpot CRM, Salesforce CRM. This information should be flowing through and allow you as a leader to report on that information over the course of the quarter. And you can see if specific objections are coming up more often than others, or if the team need a bit of training on certain parts of the qualification process. We know that the top performers are doing this much better than the B and C players, but on average, it still takes nearly 5 meetings to get all of this information completed. So it does take time, but be very clear about what information you want your team to capture at each stage. And that the gates and triggers between the different stages are really key. So don't allow them to skip stages or to move on to the next stage if they haven't captured enough information through the qualification process to allow them to engage on the next stage in the sales process. The main reasons why top performers are losing opportunities versus the average performers. And the content here is really quite stark. So this comes from some of the analysis we've done of the call recordings. Our top performers are losing opportunities mostly down to the fact that the solution that they're selling doesn't actually fit with the customer's requirements. It doesn't have the features they're looking for, or they're unable to really get under the skin and prove the ROI. Or perhaps the ROI is just not high enough compared to the other projects the customer might be working on at any particular time. Now, for me, I'm okay with that. It's okay if what we're selling isn't what they need to buy, or if we can't prove the ROI to a strong enough point, because ultimately, if we end up convincing the customer to buy and they don't get the ROI, they're going to churn anyway. So I'm kind of okay with those objections as they come through. The average performers, on the other hand, tend to deal with the reasons their deals are closing off as lost is much more around the fact that the customer doesn't see it as a high enough priority. They've decided to go with a competitor, or perhaps they just don't think they've got enough budget for this solution. The truth is, unfortunately, most of us are selling a solution where there isn't a predefined budget. But if you can help the customer understand why this should be a priority and why it should be a priority over and above other things that they might be thinking about, that's what we see the top performers are doing much better than the B and C players. So we should be investing our time in arming our sellers with the tools they need to deal with those objections and really ask the interesting questions to be able to really understand the impacts that the solution can have on their business and how it compares to other solutions that they're reviewing. Now, we went one step further and looked at where the top performers are dealing with those objections. And what we can see very clearly when we analyze the calls and the discovery process and the sales cycle of the top performers, they are uncovering the objections much, much earlier in the sales cycle versus the average performers. And they are much more likely to deal with those objections around ROI in that discovery and qualification stage, while the B and C players are really only touching on ROI at the very late stages of the sales cycle. We also know that the top performers are much more likely to have the finance persona engaged in that sales cycle before they get to presenting back the solution, rather than the B and C players, who are the average performers that tend to only engage with the finance persona when they have to. So I would encourage everybody to think about getting the finance persona that's involved in your sales cycle involved in that business case building, rather than just waiting to present them back the solution. We also know that if the economic buyer raises those ROI concerns after the solution is presented, the likelihood of the deals closing one drops by nearly 80%. So we really need to do a better job at getting under the skin of what those ROI concerns are much, much earlier. And that's what the top performers are much better at doing. So at this stage, we then start thinking about how deals are kind of coming together. I'm a big fan of deal rooms. If you're not already using deal rooms, there's lots of different ways of doing it. We use Slack, but you can start to bring into the deal rooms all these disparate data points. So start to understand, it's a really simple way of being able to digest everything going on in an opportunity. You can do this inside Salesforce, you can do it inside HubSpot, or inside Slack. But you should be looking at how often are we updating the opportunities? How much progression are we seeing? Because if it's every week, your chances of winning the deals are 17% higher if we're seeing progress on a weekly basis. But on the other side, if opportunities are skipping stages, they're almost half as likely to close. So we want to be much more considered about the stage progression and the gates and triggers through those. We also know that the top performers are 4 times more likely to have their next steps and meetings defined at all stages. If you have over 7 days between an opportunity, between a meeting and the next meeting being at least booked, you don't need to have the meeting within 7 days, but if it's not in the diary within 7 days of the last meeting taking place, the win rates drop dramatically. On the close one opportunities, we tend to be a lot more multi-threaded. On average, by the time we get to present back the solution, we might have had 9 stakeholders actively involved in the sales process. The timing stage is materially different. The close one opportunities have quite a lot of momentum. They're not spending that much time in stage. So the depth of each bar suggests how many days we're spending in stage. So momentum is key to maintaining our win rates. When you start to see meetings getting cancelled, again, it's a really good early indicator this deal is likely to be on a trajectory to close loss. If you get 2 cancelled meetings, the chance of the deal winning is actually lower than losing. So you're much more likely to use that as an early indicator, and you might want to kind of interrupt the sales process and make a conscious decision whether it's something you should still be working on. So really keen to understand how the audience's perception of what proportion of your sellers are hitting at least 80% of your quota. If it's 50% or more of your sellers, you're really in rare air. We're seeing on average somewhere between 20 and 30% of sales teams are hitting 80% or more of quota. So if you're over 50%, well done. If you're below 50%, there's work to be done. And so to kind of bring together all the insights we found about top performers, we know that the top performers are nearly 3.5 times more likely to have a qualification completed. and they are much more consistent. In fact, top performers are closing 30% of their opportunities often lost at the discovery stage. Okay, so I'll say that one more time. Your top performers are closing off 30% of their opportunities is lost at that discovery stage. So don't beat them up about it, right? The conversion rates, the level of coverage your top performers need to hit quota is much, much lower than the level of coverage your B and C players need to hit quota. So in fact, what we should be doing is encouraging the B and C players to close off more of their opportunities at that discovery stage if they're not a fit. The top performers are much more likely to have high quality relationships. One of the things that we spend a lot of time doing is scoring engagement. And we score relationships out of 100. And so understanding how much momentum you have with different stakeholders is really a good indicator as to whether this deal is likely to trend towards closing one. And the top performers are 5 times more likely to have those high quality relationships and twice as likely to self-source their own opportunities.
We'll return to the episode in a moment. This podcast is brought to you by Ebsta. Every year, we produce the B2B Sales Benchmarks Report. It provides insights from the analysis of billions of revenue dollars, revealing what attributes drive top sales performance and highlighting where time and money are wasted. To get early access to this year's benchmarks report, sign up for our newsletter at ebsta.com/newsletter. Now, back to revenue insights.
The top performers are also seeing, they've also got, they're 5 times more likely to have that economic buyer engaged before the solution is presented back. So if you're waiting to get that top of those economic buyers bought in at the time you present back the solution, it's too late. You want them involved in the business case building, even if it's just to get them involved in that meeting for 15 or 20 minutes, get their input before you present back the solution. Otherwise, you're shooting in the dark and you don't know if your business case is going to land. The top performers are 3.5 times less likely to close a deal due to indecision. We know that most businesses don't have a predefined budget for what we're selling, but the top performers are able to work with the customer to build that business case and prove that we can give them a return. They're also over 3.5 times more likely to close those opportunities at the discovery stage. We talked about that earlier. And they're 4 times more likely to update an opportunity every single week. So momentum is absolutely key when we're looking at winning opportunities. Now, I would encourage you all to have a look at the pipeline when you go back to your office. And I guarantee you've got deals in there that are not real. So, get ruthless, stop the team working on those opportunities that aren't real and help them to close them off as well so they could work on something a lot more productive. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Adam, who's going to walk you through a quick case study.
Thank you very much, Guy. Looking forward to it. This is something I probably present on a much more regular basis than you, so happy to take the reins for this one. So this is an example, anonymized. This is an Ebsta customer. And they came to us a number of months ago with these problems. They had a huge delta in rep velocity. So that means the difference between the top and the bottom performers was 4x. They had low win rate. They had poor quota attainment. Their forecast accuracy was way below average, and their sales cycle was too long. And typically what happens when you work with Ebsta is we crunch the numbers. We use the analysis engine that provides you and provides the market with the B2B benchmark reports. We turn that engine and we put it solely on the on our customers' data, and we capture that data source from things like the mail server, from the CRM, from conversations that have been happening. And in this particular case, we're just going to focus on these four key things that had a material impact on sales cycle. 4 key factors that we were able to implement change on using the platform. The first is engagement. And by doing the analysis, we were able to identify that if they could get their engagement score to 80 or more, it had a 6 times impact on win rate. If they could get 6 to 8 relationships on an opportunity, it would increase their win rates by 2x. If they could focus on getting the VP level of operations involved on an opportunity, it would have a 4 times impact on win rate. And if they used the deal qualification methodology properly and used Ebsta's time and stage benchmarking, they would be able to reduce slippage and reduce sales cycles. And ultimately, what the Ebsta tool, once it's embedded in the organization and this organization, it provides you visual cues on every opportunity live in flight, so that all of a sudden everybody in the organization is locked in and laser focused on what needs to happen. And what we saw within the space of 1 quarter is that all of a sudden the average engagement on each opportunity jumped from 67 to 83. So all of a sudden, by showing managers where their reps were falling down on engagement, we're able to drive incremental performance. And we did that in just 1 quarter. All of a sudden, we saw an increase on average relationships on an opportunity from 3 to 6. Again, by flagging that information and making it visible on the opportunity record. All of a sudden, 23% of the opportunities in the pipeline had this VP level of operations. And we were able to reduce sales cycles from 147 to 109 days. And we're able to reduce slippage by 6% because they saw visually how well qualified their deals were, and they had benchmarks visually on the opportunity record as to how long these deals have been in stage and in flight for. And the ultimate result of that is that you get this huge uptick in performance. We're able to increase sales velocity by 50% in 1 quarter. The top performers, while they undoubtedly get benefit from Ebsta, they're already achieving, they're doing the right things, they're engaging correctly, they are multi-threading correctly, they're objection handling correctly. Where you see the huge material gains, the business impact from using a solution like ours is in the long tail. It's shifting the B and C players from, 50, 30, 60% of quota up to 75, 80, 90% of quota. And actually, in this particular case, we delivered more revenue with less headcount. Just to wrap up on this, how do we replicate top performers? We really need to understand the accounts and the personas that are leading to the greatest velocity. You need to capture the data from source in order to be able to do that. It's the first thing that many companies are missing out on. We need ruthless qualification. We need to encourage and actively celebrate our reps qualifying out deals at an early stage. We need to be able to coach our reps to handle objections effectively. And actually going back to the qualification piece, it's really focusing on that critical event, the priorities and the decision-making process that are the keys. We need to make sure that we're multi-threaded. We're not ignoring the CFO, and that we have the right seniority of stakeholders on deals. And finally, we need to proactively manage and advance opportunities. Book a meeting from a meeting is one of the golden nuggets that I slap my team over the wrists on if that hasn't been done. But we need to get next steps in place, and we need to have a drive urgency.
Thank you, Adam. Yes, well, hopefully you all found that content really useful. We at Ebsta, we have a solution that starts with the sellers. The way we benchmark the deals that have closed, won, and lost in the past is unique to us. Everybody has a challenge with dirty data in Salesforce. We're the only player in the park that will go back and fix the data associated to deals that have closed, won, and lost in the past, so that we can then build really good benchmarks. And we use those benchmarks to identify risk in the deals that are currently in flight, and we prompt the sellers as to what they should be doing next. For managers, we're making it very easy on the opportunity record in Salesforce to identify the risks in the pipeline and prompt and help them understand really what they need to be focusing on in the pipeline inspection meetings. And for leaders, we give them a much more accurate forecast because the data is actually based on real insights that have happened in the past. And we just introduced our own brand guarantees. So we now guarantee to increase rep quota attainment in the first 6 months. We guarantee to get your forecast within 10% of the number, and we guarantee to get you live in 30 days. So hopefully we can actually start to help you influence this quarter's numbers if you decided to engage with us. And we're on a mission at Ebsta here to make every seller a top performer. A lot of you have downloaded the 2024 benchmark report up until now. We're now getting ready for the 2025 benchmark report. If anyone's got any questions, do fill them in if you want to put any questions in the chat, we'll try and address a few of those as they come up. And you can contact me or Adam through LinkedIn. So Adam, have you got any questions?
First question comes from Stephen in London. What's the number one tactic for getting better at multi-threading?
Okay, that's a great question. I think what we find is the B and C players within your sales team still have the same drive to win as your A players, but a lot of the time they don't understand how to win. And so when you go back and do the analysis and understand that by being more multi-threaded, by getting certain personas engaged earlier in the sales cycle, your win rates are a lot higher. Once you show that to the B and C players, they want to follow suit. They want to replicate the success that top performers are achieving. And that's why we're able to have such a big impact in such a short amount of time. And so when it comes to getting those stakeholders actively engaged, you want to be going through your champion and encouraging them and explaining to them, look, if I'm going to invest, your time is just as valuable as your buyer's time is. And what we don't want to be doing is spending too much time on a sales cycle if the customer's not bought into it. So being very descriptive about helping your buyer to explain to them how to buy, which stakeholders they should be engaging, that should be bringing into the sales cycle at each stage, and being explicit with them that you're not allowed to move those stages until we get the buy-in from those stakeholders, oftentimes gets the right sales cycle going. And they buy into a process that they're going to commit time to and you're going to commit time to.
Yeah, I'd also add there, guys, that, particularly if you're a seller, listening to this, or you're looking for advice for your team of sellers, that really lean into the network at your C-suite and your VP level. Everybody's connected to everybody these days on LinkedIn. It's the relationships held across, your C-suite and your senior leaders who have much more market-facing appearance and awareness. It's leaning into those connections in order to drive the right conversations and pulling in your senior resources where you need to.
Yeah, I like that. I think how many times have we said that sales is a team sport, and we all work together to help get the deals on board and to support the customers, right? So if your C-suite are not actively involved, they should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question here from Michael Phelan. How do you address the 30% drop in discovery meetings?
How do you address the 30% drop?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand where that question's come from.
I think what Michael's asking is how do we solve for 30% of the meetings falling out in discovery?
Yes.
My view on that is, this is a biased one. We work for Ebsta is really being locked in and laser focused on persona and ICP. And if you can get those two right and you invest your marketing dollars solely on those the right leads, and you get your sales guys trained to not to touch anything that isn't ICP fit and persona fit, then we tend to see a lot higher, a lot less dropout at that discovery phase, and means you're spinning a lot less wheels.
But I think that the truth is that those top performers are being ruthless in the way they do their qualification. They're looking for reasons to reach a consensus with the customer that this may not be the right time for them to buy. Because if they can get that consensus, then it's the second best outcome. They're no longer investing any time in it. And the buyer has got value from the session because they now understand that maybe now is not the right time, but in 3 months' time, when they are ready, this person who helped them make that decision that now is not the right time might be the right person to engage with. So being ruthless in that discovery stage, qualifying out opportunities, making sure that they're only working on deals that they know ultimately can lead to a positive outcome, is kind of gives them that confidence to keep on that journey. And it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. They're only working deals that really match ICP, where they've got buy-in from the right stakeholders. They know there's a budget and there's a critical event they're working towards. And guess what? Their win rates are a lot higher because they were ruthless in their qualification process. So one of the data points I live and breathe is understanding the level of coverage each rep needs to hit quota. And you might find those numbers are wildly different across your sales team. And so while I might need 5 times coverage, Adam may only need 2 times coverage. And so understanding that means that when you have a conversation with Adam, it's a very different one to one with me. So helping the sellers, and that number should be coming down quarter after quarter. They shouldn't need as much coverage to hit their number. And they need to, and we need to be encouraging them and giving them the tools and helping them build the muscle to have the confidence to close those deals off as lost sooner so they can work on the right things. Because if your business is like the majority of the ones we talk to, they're only winning 25% of the opportunities they're working on. Okay, and some of them are even lower than that. And so, if you think about the volume of time being spent in a sales cycle, if you're only winning 1 in 4, that's a lot of energy being spent on deals that aren't actually closing one.
Another question from David Fox. How much does reference selling impact the sales cycle length and the average deal size?
When you've got a partner involved in the sales process, when the customers come in warm, they are so much more likely to have a positive outcome. Now, Adam and I preach this, and we experience it ourselves. We do a lot of work with PE houses who introduce Ebsta to perhaps some of their underperforming portcos. Now, when we get introduced through the PE house that owns a business, all of a sudden the CEO, CRO of the business, they are welcoming us with open arms, because we've been introduced as a way of solving the big challenge they've got around their growth isn't going as fast as they want it to. 80% of their reps are missing quota, and they want to have a step change, and they want to have that change quickly. And when that introduction has been made through a trusted source, the win rates are much, much higher. And even just looking at the way the data we presented, only 10% of opportunities that come through those partner sources, but they represent over a third of the revenue that we're booking. So it has a massive impact, because at least in B2B sales, relationships still drive revenue, even in the days, all these days of AI. And AI is really there to deal with the admin, but we really need to lean into those relationships, because they have a massive impact on win rates. Well, thank you all so much for joining. Really hope you enjoyed the series of webinars, and see you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights from Ebsta. If you want to learn more from some of the brightest minds on how to predictably and efficiently grow revenue, then subscribe to our newsletter. We'll deliver actionable insights straight to your inbox. Go to ebsta.com/newsletter. See you soon.